So the pathway to prosperity for Africa is self-reliance. And that's self-reliance, self-reliance, self-reliance. It cannot be overemphasized. You see, for decades, the relationship between Africa and the West has been marked by aid, often seen as a lifeline for struggling nations. And you can imagine that there is barely a country on the African continent that you can describe as developed, not even South Africa, for varied reasons. Okay, so of course, African nations or countries are considered struggling nations. But across the continent, there has been a growing recognition that true development cannot come from handouts. All right, so we've finally woken up to that point of understanding that constantly taking charity is not the way out for any country that wants to be self-reliant or develop. African nations have the potential, of course, to thrive independently. We have everything that it takes on the continent to prosper, to thrive. Okay, so tapping into our own resources, our creativity, and resilience is the only way. It's the only way. There is no savior that is going to come and save Africa and get her out of this quagmire that we find ourselves in on the continent, where we're riddled with wars and conflicts and poverty, even though we have everything it takes to be a nation, a continent that should be envied around the world. One of the examples that I'm going to use today to show how possible it is for Africa to be self-reliant is Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso. It was just the other day that things began to change. It's not quite even 3 years. However, there's a lot that is going on in that country, even though it's not seen on mainstream media, that other African nations need to emulate. Now, just to give a little backdrop, Burkina Faso is a landlocked country in Western Africa. Burkina Faso gained independence from France in 1960, just like many other African nations or countries, and it was originally known as Republic of Upper Volta before the country was then renamed Burkina Faso on the 4th of August 1984 by Thomas Sankara of blessed memory. Okay, so Burkina Faso has long faced challenges like poverty, like every other African country, political instability, and limited infrastructure. This is not unique to Burkina Faso. This is something that spreads across almost every nation on the African continent. Yet, despite these hurdles, since ousting France, the nation has shown remarkable strength in carving out a path to prosperity without relying on foreign aid. I know just before Burkina Faso tried to follow this path, this is something that was it Tanzania tried to do, but of course we all know the story of what happened to the president of Tanzania, Magufuli of blessed memory as well. Okay, so we're not going to be scared and have our tails in between our legs, because we know that every leader that has woken up or stood up to do something for his people or their people have been silenced. Okay, because you can imagine during the COVID period, how quickly things was beginning to look like, changing for Tanzania. And then suddenly the inevitable happened, which has been happening for let's not digress anyway. Okay, so the challenges that Burkina Faso has faced is not unique to Burkina Faso. Like I already mentioned, every single country or nation on the African continent has struggled with poverty, political instability, and limited infrastructure. Yet, despite all of these hurdles, finally, after ousting France in asking France to leave their country in 2023, Burkina Faso's military government formally announced the termination of its military agreement with France. And of course, this decision required the withdrawal of approximately 400 French special forces personnel from the country within a month. They gave them a month to leave. I don't want to digress, but I know that time period was a bit turbulent. People were a little unsure of how things were going to pan out, because Niger was also subsequently doing its own thing and wanting France to leave. And there was a little bit of drama that ensued after that between Nigeria and Niger. And of course, it was obvious that Western powers, which was trying to use Nigeria to undo and outdo Niger, but that didn't work. It didn't pan out well. Okay, so Burkina Faso's story, of course, is one of ingenuity and resilience. Over the years, the country has steadily worked to strengthen its agricultural sector, and that's something that every African country on the continent can tap into. Immediate, opportunities that's there. It's the agricultural sector. This can provide employment. It can, in a short space of time, provide ability for people to have an income, earn an income, and provide for their families. And of course, they've also gone on to improve local industries and invest in human capital, which is the most important thing that Africa has. Investing in its human capital. Africa has the youngest population on Earth right now. So forecasting into the future, you can see what a great future Africa can have. It's so important to understand that how important people are to the scope of things, to development of countries. Go and look at what's going on in China. It's even got to the point where there is money incentives being given to their people, encouraging people to get married and bear children, because they already can see that from the time they had the one child per family policy, their population has dwindled. And in a couple of decades, as the old people get older and the young people get to the point where they're no longer in the childbearing age, it's going to become very evident that their manpower is going to be very, 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 very impacted negatively. So of course, rather than waiting for aid from abroad, Burkina Faso has taken charge of its destiny, proving, of course, that self-reliance is not only possible, but essential for long-term growth. And every time African nations want to learn a thing or two, they keep looking to the West. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense, because what works for the West might not work for Africa.